Yukio Mishima, more like Yu-KINO Mishima. Oh! I'm sorry for that. I love my puns. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry for that. So, these two, double feature, double feature right here. These two ones. Worst one by Mishima, best one, but one of the best from Mishima. These two are fantastic works. Absolutely great works. I still think this is probably the worst thing Mishima has written, and I'll get to why. But I wonder how I should organize this first. Maybe I should do the best for last and the worst for first. Why is this one so bad? Why is Life for Sale, one of these most beautiful covers I've seen in a while, such a bad one? This was not written in a similar vein as to how Confessions of a Mask is written. Confessions of a Mask is quite literally a confession of Mishima about his homosexuality, how he blossoms and why he contains certain ideas. Life for Sale is a satirical piece done on pulp novels published in a newspaper, and it definitely feels like that because I do not feel the same love, passion, care, or deliberate sense of prose as Mishima has. It has his usual ideas, usual, you know, sense of ideas, motifs, all that. Motifs, themes, you know, ideas of nation, sexuality, homosexuality, as well, you know, suicide. The story is literally about a man who tried killing himself and failed, and basically him trying to figure out what life's about after it. What makes it not work is that this works as more or less like, you know, there's a through line for how the story works, but it's not a very cohesive narrative. It's basically a collection of short stories published within whatever newspaper he published it within, and it's very much feeling like that. It feels less like a work made by Mishima for love, and more of just made for a paycheck. And the note definitely suffers for it. The sex, it just feels like it's there. I'm not sure what is there to analyze. I guess you can say his sort of symbolic representation of, you know, sex and violence meant to be a metaphorical sort of representation for, you know, the samurai fetishization of sex and violence mingled together. I guess you could say that. And that's me giving the benefit of the doubt, because I know how Mishima operates. He typically has a lot of symbolism. He doesn't do scenes unless there's a reason for it. Similarly, this is one of the reasons as to why Confessions of a Mask hits so hard. Because after reading this, Confessions of a Mask, it's very graphic. I will say this. It's very much a graphic tale. It's about Mishima and, you know, sort of the mentality he was going through with his blossoming sexuality, as well as some of his peculiar fetishization. I will say, if you're going to read this and you really want to understand what it's like to be in the mind of a gay man, you certainly will. Because, goodness gracious, I shouldn't say gay. Because the main character within this, in this regard, is bi. He still has some, I wouldn't say some hint of sexual attraction towards women. But his, very much his gay, homosexual side is very strong compared to what emotions and attraction he holds towards women. And it's seemingly kind of, there's some weird metaphorical representation of how Mishima's views on women are sort of weird and conflated, especially certain attractions he holds towards said women and how they relate to him as a person. As well as the fact that compared to his homosexuality, it doesn't feel as perverse with his homosexuality. In fact, one could regard it as almost sort of loving, tender, not as perverse or perturbing as it is with how he feels within women. Like, it's weird. Even here, when he compares having sexual intercourse with, you know, women in this one, it feels very violent, it feels needlessly rough, it's not really beautiful. However, him describing a man's body is one of the most beautiful and entrancing things you could read about. It's still very creepy somewhat how in-depth Mishima gets within Confessions of a Mask, but it's so beautiful about how it sort of portrays the mentality of a man suffering so hard of his sexuality, the depths of his lust, how he feels, and you still get the representation that I talked about here with Life for Sale, about sort of the conflation with sex with violence, because Mishima sort of describes his lust, this intense bloodlust, and it's sort of a representation of Mishima's fascination with the male body, with the samurai, his idealization of the warrior, and it sort of gives a hint as to what Mishima's attraction was. He was in love with the idea of this warrior male, the masculine side of a man, and he sort of conflates it with the inner femininity that comes he sort of associates homosexuality with. And it's a very beautiful, despite its perversion somewhat, because yes, this is very much a sexual work. There's a much intense graphic detail about everything that sort of comes with, you know, a blossoming sexuality. Any graphic detail that you can think of, Mishima will not, like, avoid it. Like, so you're gonna get a lot of graphic detail, but it's not, I highly recommend it. It's weirdly a beautiful work, one of the best I've read from Mishima. And maybe it's because I read this one, which was very disappointing, but this is definitely sort of just how it represents Mishima as a person, how it represents sort of the ideas he had to hold in when he came to sexuality, and the mask he had to wear. The mask he had to wear on for society when it came to him as an individual and his sexuality is one of the most beautiful, detailed works I've seen. It's not the best. It's high, though. It's high tier. I will probably do a ranking list with all of Mishima's novels. It's going to take a while because the Sea of Fertility, despite the fact I love the first two books.
Boy, don't you just love it when your camera, for no absolute fucking reason, just decides to fucking kill itself?
I sure don't. Anyways, so yes, as I was saying, I plan to do a whole series of videos on Mishima himself one day. A whole video essay dedicated to why I think he's one of the greatest authors to have graced literature. Pretty much, yeah. It sucks I have to fucking re-record this last portion when it's so short. But yes, I do plan to cover them. If I were to give a rating to these two, this one, barely 4. It's 4, really. It's below average for Mishima. And overall, it's not a very congruent or tightly written narrative. For Confessions of a Mask, probably a 7 out of 10. I don't really think numbers are good to convey just the sheer brilliance of Confessions of a Mask. Highly recommend reading these two. I think even this one's the worst. Even the worst of Mishima is fucking fantastic. So, just, you know, go ahead. If you guys have any other suggestions or you have any interests to talk about, leave your comments down below. Talk to you guys soon. My Patreon's in the link below, because of course it is.